Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining this panel discussion today on healing the whole self. The intention that I had in bringing this discussion together is to create a dialogue on how we can use healing and recovery during what has been a really difficult past year. I've noticed recently that there's a lot of people looking for help, a lot of people stepping onto a healing path, and some people are quite lost. And so I've brought together some really incredible minds to share a little bit about their story and hopefully provide a little bit of guidance and support to you on yours. So let's go ahead and welcome our panelists. Hello. Thank you all so much for being here. So let's start with introductions. Stephanie, say hi.
Hello.
This is Stephanie Hicks, Dr. Stephanie Hicks. She founded Yoga for Black Lives, and this is an amazing organization that supports resistance to state-sanctioned violence against Black life by giving people life-giving and life-affirming practice of yoga. She also is a faculty member at the University of Michigan's program on intergroup relations. Stephanie, where are you calling from today? And tell us right now, what is bringing you joy in your life?
Well, I am calling in or StreamYarding in from Ann Arbor, Michigan. And thanks for having me. I just want to be able to say that on camera. And what's bringing me joy right now? Sunshine. I mean, there's so little of it, for those of us in the Midwest, they have like months and months and months. So that like crack of light that is now getting earlier and earlier every day is bringing me a ton of joy on on just a superficial level. But and then there's stuff like this, being connected to other people, that's bringing me joy as well, but mostly sunshine.
Absolutely. Thank you and welcome. Next up, we have Gabriel Halpern. Gabriel comes to us with 51 years of continuous study and practice of yoga. 51 years. He has studied directly with BKS Iyengar and was named by Yoga Journal among the 10 most influential teachers who've helped shape yoga in America. In 1985, he founded the Yoga Circle in Chicago and has been a major, major influence on many, maybe all of some of your most favorite Chicago yoga teachers. He's touched all of us in some way. So thank you, Gabriel. Where are you joining from and what's bringing you joy right now?
Thanks a lot for including me. I really appreciate being the elder on the panel. I'm calling from Dalewood, which is a little community in Chicago right by Oak Park. And first, I want to say you're never too old to hold a stuffed animal. Okay, so don't let your age, it could be the guitar, but a stuffed animal really works. So I just want to let you know that. What's bringing me joy is my daughter is in visiting, who I haven't seen for a while after everybody in the family was double vaccinated. And so to see your heart walking around on the outside of your body, what can I say? So that's bringing me joy. And I ditto on the sunlight.
Thank you for being here. Next up, we have Kelsey Rose Tortorici. Kelsey is an anti-capitalist community builder, astrologer, and teacher of so many things, including astrology, yoga, Reiki, spirituality, human design, and music. Kelsey is one of the co-founders of Inner Sense Healing Arts Collective and is currently holding space for individuals and groups to grow deeper understanding of themselves through the modalities that I mentioned above. Kelsey, where are you joining from and what is bringing you joy?
Hi, Rach, and hi, everyone. I'm calling in from Vegas. It's weird, right? I live here now. That's a new thing. And what's bringing me joy is the mountains that I can see just past my computer. I've always felt called to the mountains, so they've been bringing me joy every day since I moved here last fall.
Thank you. Next up, we have Dr. Megan Ross. Megan is a psychologist, entrepreneur, and professor who focuses on the impact of embodied organizational development. Her work intersects organizational, somatic, trauma, and peace psychology in individuals, organizations, and nations. Dr. Ross is a graduate professor in international and clinical psychology, and she also serves her community with direct psychological. Megan, where are you joining from, and what's bringing you joy right now?
I'm in Chicago, and what is bringing me joy right now is the intimacy of my family. We have found such rich, deep connection over this last year, and then some change, and it's still evolving, and it's bringing me a lot of joy.
Thank you. And then we have Taz Rashid, also known as DJ Taz. Taz has been producing and creating mindful events globally over the last several years. He performs and DJs at events such as Yoga Journal Conference, Wanderlust Festivals, Rise Festival, Bhakti Fest, and others. What is so awesome is that he also teaches workshops to yoga teachers on creating playlists to create sound healing soundscapes in their environments. Anyone who practices with me regularly, he is on most of my playlists. There's at least one or more songs from DJ Taz. He's incredibly generous with his music. Taz, where are you joining from, and what's bringing you joy?
First of all, thank you, Rachel, to you and Mike for inviting me. When I saw your email, I was like, oh my God, these guys are amazing. I love their events, and it's been so long since we've connected. I had to say yes, and I love the subject. I'm calling from Florida. I'm in Clearwater Beach, Florida, and that's close to Tampa, if you're not familiar. My family and I came down here in October, and we've stayed here since. I am from Skokie, Illinois, Chicago. So what's giving me great joy right now is there's a possibility we might actually move down here because it's so amazing, and it's like another world, it feels like, and there's a lot of great opportunity. And so right now we are house hunting. Look, it's like a craziest market apparently in real estate, and we're in the middle of it. And like right after this call today, we're gonna go see like 6 houses. So it's just like, it's an exciting time, and there's a lot of unknown in that. So that's exciting to me. It's like butterflies. Like, we don't know what's going to happen. So that's giving me joy.
Yeah. And I will add, so this is my first time moderating a panel. I'm a little nervous, but it's kind of full circle because the first panel I was ever invited to sit on was moderated by Taz. So it feels like a full circle moment.
I do remember that. That was fun. You guys were great.
All right, so I'm moderating. We're going to keep moving this right along. You all are brilliant. You have incredible minds. And sometimes I might have to just go, okay, let's keep it moving. Can we all agree to that?
Yep.
Okay, let's dive in. The system of yoga is a vast and sometimes complex system. For some, people enter this practice through the body, through a posture practice. For others, it's a practice about observing their mind and their patterns, their mental patterns. And for others, it might be purely a connection to God. What was your entry point to this practice? And has that focus changed over time? And is that change reflected in your work with others? Yeah, so sort of a 3-part question. Let's start with Megan.
Sure. I had the absolute pleasure as a child, which is now commonplace, but when I was younger, it wasn't. And I had the absolute pleasure of being introduced to yoga when I was 12 years old. And I've held a practice for the last 31 years. And I was introduced to yoga through this really, really gentle, connected way where it was the intersection actually of the 3 that you offered. And we did yoga outside as a group every single day. And there was a yogi from New York. I'm from Olympia, Washington. So this is definitely Pacific Northwest vibe. But who ended up introducing me was Kathleen Hill, and she would teach in New York City, and she would come out every summer and teach me. And I started teaching yoga when I was 13 and was able to teach really young kids. And it was mind-blowing. It really catapulted my movement understanding, and it gave me a foundation for my movement and psychology and somatic understanding that was really, really beautiful. And to your other question, I lost.
Did she freeze or did I freeze?
It's frozen. Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
So I lost that connection to yoga through the late late 90s to early 2000s, when yoga had a different tone, and I've been able to get that back. And I would say that that's been the really beautiful arc of it, both within my own body, but also within the culture that it's happening in the United States, and the exposure that I've been able to get to. And yes, it does show up in the work that I do, for sure.
Stephanie.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Chicago, and I grew up taking dance lessons, all different types of dance lessons. And I thought it was just a hobby, but I think what I came to realize was that movement to me was somehow connected to spirituality. And I didn't really understand that as a kid, but the older I got, I think that shown to be more true for me. But having a regular yoga practice coincided with my time in graduate school. And I always feel like, people need recovery from lots of things. And one of the things that I needed recovery from was my time in graduate school. So that's when my yoga practice probably became more solid. But in 2016, I was finishing my yoga teacher training, and I was involved in different activist groups. And that was also the year that Philando Castile and Alton Sterling were killed in July of that year in the same week. And so that's when I started Yoga for Black Lives. So to answer that question of sort of, did my practice shift? I think in some ways, it did shift sort of in terms of, wanting to bring people together around the practice to be able to celebrate Black life. But in some ways, I think it's always held that it's been, just a place for me to connect to myself. And I've just been doing that in different iterations, over the time that I've been practicing. But yeah, that's a bit of my story.
I think that's a path for a lot of us teachers, is that we find so much healing and help through it, and then we just want to bring people together through it. Yeah. Taz.
Yeah. So believe it or not, after I graduated college, there was a year I was selling copier machines in Chicago, like those big, those like they're like $10,000. But I don't know, somehow I was at a job fair and I got I got into a position where I was selling these things. I was just like looking for a job. I didn't have my purpose at the time. And one of my clients used to be this really popular bookstore in Chicago. It's called Transitions Bookstore. Maybe some of you guys remember it. It was like really cool, but this was not like your average Barnes and Nobles, or, they had books on chakras and yoga and Deepak Chopra books, and The Secret was really popular back then. So they're one of my clients, and they weren't paying their bills or something like that. I don't remember, but I didn't really know about this world as much. So when I walked in, I'm like, oh, this is a cool bookstore. But I was like, there's something like funny going on here. It's not like a normal bookstore. And back then, you guys remember CDs, compact discs. Most of us probably here remember that. Anyways, as I was walking out of my call, there was this CD there. It said, binaural beats meditation, positive thinking. And I was like in sales at the time, and I was just like trying to be as positive as possible, because I was selling copier machines. I mean, it doesn't get as, it's a nasty job. Okay. I don't know, if wearing suits in the Chicago summer, walking around trying to sell copiers to people. There's like, what? I've been so many buildings I've gotten kicked out of. Anyways, so I saw this and I'm like, man, I need to be as positive as possible. And this was around the same time The Secret was popular. I don't know if you guys remember that book about the law of attraction. So I'd heard of this. I asked the guy, I'm like, what's going on? He's like, well, these are meditations. These are guided meditations. Someone's speaking, but you have to listen to it with headphones. And there's special music going on that actually changes your brain waves to go into deeper meditative states, going from alpha. Like right now we're in beta, like we're thinking, talking, logically speaking. Start daydreaming, you go into alpha, and then deeper meditations, you go into theta. And that's where we want to kind of get to, is like the theta level. So this music helped. And I was like, I don't know what you said, but it sounds interesting. I'll take that CD. So this was my introduction into guided meditation. And meditation was really the pathway for me to get into the yogic world, because it changed my life. I was still like now I consider myself like a bro gone conscious, you know, like I was just a bro unconscious then a lot, because like I was partying a ton, you know, like chasing that like Matrix dream. Maybe you've like heard of it. It's like you're doing what society tells you, and you're just like running around really without knowing what you're doing at all. Just kind of society's pulling strings on your programs. So that was me at that time. But these guided meditations and just meditating in general completely reprogram my subconscious to more abundant thinking and getting deeper connection with my purpose. And from there, that led me into more yoga practice, because I started just looking inward. So my journey really began with an inward journey of meditation that led me eventually to the yoga world, because it's so, you know, well accepted. And now meditation's like hotter than ever, you know, but this was like 2007, 2008-ish kind of time. And these practices led me to meet my wife now, who was also on this path, and the lifestyle I have now. So guided meditation changed my life. And real quick, I'll mention that when I was young, I was like, you know, when you're young, you're kind of like inquisitive, and just like you go to a library and just checking out like books. I found some yoga books, and I'm like, oh my God, it's from India. It's kind of like where I'm from. I'm from Bangladesh originally, and India's like our neighbor, and we all kind of look the same. And I was like, what are these guys doing? Like these funky postures. I did not connect with it in a spiritual way, but more just a physical kind of thing. I just like practiced in my basement, my parents' basement, you know, 7th grade, different postures, just to become more flexible. But obviously later in life, I found the spiritual connection to that. So I was introduced to it, and then I rediscovered it later. But really, my pathway has been through meditation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that copier sales job. Yeah.
Started it all. That's not where most people start their yoga practice. Kelsey.
There's a little parallel, I guess, at the beginning of my story to DJ Taz's, in that my yoga practice began sort of as like a coping mechanism in response to a previous job. And that job was teaching music. My background's in music education and singing. And so I taught in Chicago high school choir for 8 years. And it was like, I think it was my first year teaching, that 2011, that I started practicing yoga. I can't really remember why I started. I think I just like, it was almost aesthetic. Like I just had a sense that like, I want to be around those people. Like I want to experience that. No lie, I want to be in those pretty sunny rooms. Like I want to be in those beautiful rooms with the hardwood floors and the big windows. Like I just sensed that I needed to be there and experience it. And yoga really became my gateway to all the other esoteric practices. And in combination, they've all really changed my life. So I'm like really easy on the idea that you know, people come to yoga for aesthetic reasons. Like I'm always like, whatever, like get them there, it will seep, right? So my first reason was, I'm sure there was also like an intuitive energetic call, but it felt aesthetic to me at the time. And it's hard for me to think about whether it was more a mental or physical thing first. My constitution is very fiery and airy, so I'm naturally pretty ungrounded. And I found yoga, looking back as an astrologer, I realized when my 5th house Aries sun progressed into the 6th house in Taurus, like to the month. And so yoga was the first practice that got me in my body. And so that was huge, but then it instantly shifted my relationship to my mind and my like worldview and philosophy, because within moments of practicing yoga, I was having this experience of, oh, I can be present in my body this way. Oh, I can be unattached to the thoughts in my mind. And that just like very quickly rippled through every aspect of my perception of the world. So physical, I guess, for like a second, and then immediately very mental and philosophical from there.
Thank you. I bet that some people listening also have come to yoga to cope with a really hard job or a purposeless job. Give us some, you can heart the comments if that is you. Gabriel.
All right. Well, I get a little historical perspective here. since you guys are talking about things that happened in the 90s and 2000. And I go back to 1968. My first yoga class was in an acting class at Queens College in New York. By the way, Brooklyn is in the house. Okay, so there was really like sensory training. It wasn't really yoga, but we didn't know that at the time. I moved to California in 1970. I sustained a back injury when I was younger, and so there was something that was off. I was an athlete, so that was really difficult to cope with the fact that I couldn't do the range of motion and the strength. But I'm fortunate that they did not ask for surgery. And so although I was undiagnosed for 18 years till X-ray technology got better, I moved to California, and I was very fortunate to be exposed to a Kundalini yoga class. And I guess at the time I was trying to overcome my psychedelic background and find a cleaner way to explore the different planes of consciousness that we're all talking about. And then I moved into the local ashram run by Yogi Bhajan, one of the first Kundalini yoga masters who came to the United States. But I didn't know it was a teacher training ashram, because in 1970, nobody was thinking about yoga teaching as a career. And if you keep going, you know, to a certain extent, a lot of people fall away from the path and the cream rises to the crop. Not that I'm necessarily the cream, but if you're what's left after a lot of people drop out, it makes you look better than the other people who haven't had that amount of experience. And then 6 years into it, I met Mr. Iyengar, and it was a complete revolution in my approach to the therapeutic and biomechanic way of using yoga. But from right away, I studied in an ashram. So for me, there's only one understanding of yoga, which is all the 8 limbs. I will never criticize anybody for entering it into as a physical yogi or a mental yogi or whatever. But the way it was explained to me as a unitary system was one in which obviously different things will appeal to different people, but it's right out front. They're saying, here's the whole plan. It's up to you to, like, you know, take as much from the smorgasbord as you want. And so I'm just fortunate that I was exposed to it that way, and I've been able to share that with people. And because I want to be concise, I'm going to stop at that point now. But one thing about coming full circle, I ended up teaching 25 years at DePaul University yoga for the theater department. So I just thought that was a kind of uncanny thing that I got exposed to it that way, and then I had a chance to come back and share with the wonderful, talented young people in theater. So with that, I'm in.
Thank you. So there's a concept in yoga, there's a Sanskrit term, abhyasa. And Iyengar has defined it as the art of learning that which has to be learned through cultivation of disciplined action. Learning that which has to be learned through the cultivation of disciplined action. This involves long, zealous, calm, and persevering effort. To me, this sounds a lot like resilience, that it's a practice that builds resilience. What practices are you each using in your life right now to continue to show up, to continue to get up on the hard days, on the challenging days, collectively, globally, as well as personally? What's really supporting you right now? Let's start with Cass.
Yeah, so this, I guess last year was a good example for what we're talking about here, because, you know, I'm an individual who thrived with traveling, as many of us maybe here, you know, and playing music all around the US and the world. And my career was really kind of dependent around that, and my income. And so last year when COVID hit, you know, and my entire tour was shot down, I was just like, what do I do? So like I instantly went into going online, you know, and like playing music online. You can even see behind me, that's my DJ booth, you know. And so like I did all these like Zoom events online, and believe it or not, it was actually it became a popular thing. But I had to really show up to myself and stay positive, and I had to work like 3 or 4 times more than what I did the year before. Even if it was online, I had to do even more events. I had to show up to more opportunities just to kind of like make it work. But there was so much joy in that. It wasn't easy at all, but like you may think it may feel easy because it's like right there behind you, just to walk around and, you know, press buttons and play music. But it became this like how bad do you want this kind of experience for me? And like I wanted it more than ever because I was able to produce as much more music, and earlier I talked about this music that I started meditating with, this binaural beats and things like that. I actually last year and the year before started producing that same music, but again, like full circle talk, I started making that music for meditation, for guided experiences for others. So for me, it was just like really showing up more than ever to these practices over and over, producing music for situations that may not have a huge outcome, but so a lot of trust, in showing up. And I have to say, like, in those experiences, I'm super grateful that I did show up more than ever, because right now, as we are going back into more live events, things like that, going through that, like I have a full system that I can do things online now, in addition to, live things. So it's like there's possibilities for me to work with European, studios in Asia and festivals because of what happened. So super grateful for that experience. And it's show up to your craft, show up to your muse, keep putting in the work, even when it doesn't feel like the outcome is happening right away. It's like, do you want it that bad? Because in my opinion, I don't know if you've read the book. It's called A War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. If you haven't, if you're creative or just in general, get this book, because it's all about how resistance shows up in our life. It's a sneaky devil kind of thing, and the resistance is that inner energy that we all have. It's part of our ego that is trying to keep us down at times, especially when we want something really bad. And this talks about resilience and how we show up to our craft. Because if you believe in the energy of the muse, a creative force that can show up to give us or gift us an idea or a possibility or some sort of creative situation, he or she or whatever that energy is, like watching, is actually very present and connected to us, whether we realize it or not. So the more we show up to it, that muse might drop a little gem of creativity or a beautiful idea. And so with that understanding, I'm like, I love what I do, so I'm going to keep showing up as much as possible. Even if someone's not paying me right away, I believe in it. So
I love that. I feel like, that's looking towards your craft, looking towards your practice to continue to turn back and give back to you. Yeah. Beautiful. Stephanie.
Yeah. Can I ask you to repeat the last part of the question one more time? I think I fell out, and I want to make sure that I respond to what you actually asked.
What are your practices that are keeping you resilient? What's helping you currently to keep showing up?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think on a personal level, one of the things that I have hanging above my working desk, because things never really slowed down for me with the pandemic in a professional sense, because I teach at a university. And so that work kind of continued. And so for me, showing up was about how to, maintain some sense of peace as things were chaotic or shifting all the time. So on a personal level, I just keep sort of a running list of things that I go back to that I can ask myself about anytime during the day. Like, did you eat? Do you need to stand up? Do you need to call somebody? Do you need to take a couple laps around the block? Just those simple things that, that are the first to go, but are the most, sort of grounding. But I think in a larger sense, I firmly believe that hope is a discipline. And I think that I'm borrowing that from Miriam Kaba, who takes it from other great thinkers. But what that means to me is that, hope is one of those things that you have to practice like you would put rigor into anything else that you want to sort of move along and keep staying with. And so restarting Yoga for Black Lives was one of those things that I've, sort of thought about a disciplined way to practice hope. Like, there are many things that are way outside of my control, but really thinking about, what's my contribution? I think of my practice as a contribution, and what can I do in that vein that will, help maybe provide a space of respite for people, provide a space of connection in this time of sort of strange connection and disconnection. And it also reminded me of, I think what was mentioned before, like where the work is joyful. And so it let me sort of, keep that moving along. So yeah, I hope that got at that part of the question.
People are loving that your hope is a discipline practice comment. Thank you. Did you eat? That's been one of my practices too.
Yeah, it's a very important question.
Did you eat?
Yeah, that's the one question that I don't seem to forget, but the other things can go.
Shockingly, I do. But
yeah. I can call you and ask.
Yeah, please text me a couple times today. Did you eat? Gabriel, what practices are giving you life right now?
Thank you. I've been an early riser, sitting meditation, I would say Vipassana style, and pranayama, which is huge as part of the abhyasa approach that you're talking about. Of course, I'd be remiss, in case Mr. Iyengar is listening from somewhere, that the other wing of the yoga bird is vairagya, and how to have dispassion about the very thing that you're committed to, which you're going for the gold. It's a kind of tapas experience. I'm doing this again and again as if I'm trying to collect things that they say are there to be gotten if you do it sincerely. And yet at the same time, they're cultivating that part of you of letting go of your attachment to the fruit of your work. So I've been doing that for a really long time. What has sustained me in the last year was once the pandemic hit, I have a lot of people as an elder who kind of look to me to see, well, what are you going to do now with this new medium? And I'm a social person. I love being with people, and the touchy-feely part of me that's had to be, down on the down low. I haven't liked that a lot. But there were so many young teachers within my ken that I was just saying, don't freak out. I'm going to show you the old dog. I'm not too old to learn a new medium. I'm going to show you how you're going to use Zoom, and we're going to use these breakout rooms, and I still can spotlight your video and criticize your pose. And we're going to take the market beyond local, and we're going to think of new ways to use this rather than just, this is what we have to deal with now. No. Like you're talking about with the hope, we're going to energize this with the same kind of positivity that I've come to recognize as the optimism, the biology of hope that makes yoga people optimistic. So if I don't mind giving myself the little marketing blurb, I put out 297 pranayama videos over the last year to try to tell people this is a respiratory borne illness, right? The doctors are not saying anything about it. Yogis know about this. Come on, here we go. So I felt like I made that as my contribution, and that's where I'm at.
Thank you. Kelsey, what about you?
So anyone who knows me personally or has followed my meandering work through the years won't be surprised to hear me say that self-study is a big component of my practice as always, Svadhyaya. And I think even more lately, I've been doing this sort of like extra deep dive inward. I've been withdrawing from the external world more than I ever have before in like practical, visible ways, and also just in the way I move throughout my day, being very mindful of like time spent alone in my own energy and turning first to myself for guidance around things, more like to better articulate what some of those tools have been. As Rachel mentioned, I'm an astrologer. That's one of the main tools in my toolkit. And recently I've been getting more into an application of astrology called human design. It's similar in its nature and what it can bring to the person and their awareness of their ego construct to astrology, but has sort of different and in some ways more specific ways to learn and observe the self. So really just for me lately, my main practice has been really diving into understanding myself using these new systems and then like practicing applying that in my relationships and in the external world, and sort of watching my whole life change from that witness seat in response to figuring out what feels in alignment energetically for me versus what has been a result of my familial societal conditioning.
Going inward rather than looking outward so much. Megan, what about you?
We'll have to see how my internet does. The wind outside, I think, is altering it, which is kind of interesting because nature is one of the places that I've been leaning into for sure. To have, as you know, a really ancient teacher of what we're experiencing, and to know that we are of, and that there's a sharedness there. And similarly, leaning into love, cuddling, holding, if I have people around. My son is a major cuddler, and him coming into bed and holding and wanting to be with myself and his father has meant everything. And in those practices, there's been a true integration has been the most key word for me, but there has been an integrated sense of not needing to do. And that I don't need to get up and produce, that I don't need to run after, and to not know, to know that throughout my whole life, but challenge with culture to now shed the conditioning and arrive at not needing to do. And so there is a fountain that is emerging that has more energy. And it's just, it's new, it's baby, it's just beginning. So also being willing to be so curious about what's ahead.
Thank you. Cuddling as a practice. I love that.
It is. It totally is.
And if anybody doesn't have someone to cuddle with, dogs are great for that. Get yourself a little furry friend or cat. So I'm going to keep plugging my wisdom questions that I have written, but if the listeners have questions, go ahead and comment them and we'll see if we can thread them in as well. So in the presidential address this past Wednesday night, President Biden said that it's time to heal the soul of the nation. He's used that a couple of times, I believe, in speeches now. What is the role that your work plays in this collective healing of America? And whoever wants to take that. What is the role that the work you're doing in the world plays in the collective healing of America?
All right, I'll start off. One of the things I've spent my life doing is translating Eastern philosophy into contemporary wrappings so that people who don't take the yoga path or take it only partially or feel like unless they immerse themselves in it, they're not going to get the benefits from it. I've tried to translate it in a way where all around us are opportunities to develop your consciousness or develop your awareness. Each of the people on the panel were so articulate in expressing a different way of reaching out, a different perspective. So this is the idea that each person has a certain uniqueness. Hopefully their muse will touch them, right? Or as you were saying, Megan, although we're in a culture that's constantly getting you to produce and consume, yet the whole essence of practicing yoga is to lay back and have a perspective that's much more philosophical, psychological, and we can call it ultimately spiritual, even though a lot of times the word spiritual seems to put you at variance with what's material. And I think from the yoga point of view, integration is there's no difference. So how do you live your life, which includes social justice issues and everything we've been talking about, but within the container of the gift of yoga, which I believe we all feel what we love. And if we could give it to everybody, if they were ready to take it, that would be fantastic. So I try to stay in that place where I smack those younger teachers upside the head for not knowing the tradition, yet at the same time try to translate it into things that are much more Western. We don't have to warm our hands at another culture's fire. We can admire it, we can study it, we can take advantage of it, but right here in what we're doing, America is the land of opportunity. I'm still a big believer in the ultimate omega point that is the vision that unites us all. Stay the course. George Booth, do the path. 100 points of light. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm happy to go next, resonating with a lot of what Gabriel's sharing, specifically that piece of everybody has their own perspective. I think the angle through which I work with clients on astrology and teach astrology, and again, now incorporating human design, is encouraging people and helping people empower themselves to use these tools in a way that feels correct and aligned and intuitive for them. One of my astrology teachers has said, like, astrology becomes a spiritual practice when you understand it, when you are in communion with the planets and the cycles. And so, you know, for people who follow tarot, we're in a Hierophant year this year. The Hierophant is the guru, and people in the yoga world know there's this sort of death of the guru complex happening right now. And so whatever your practices are, whatever belief system it is that you're utilizing to find yourself, the only person that can really provide that map is yourself. And so I think I'm like definitely in this phase of the question of what is my work is evolving at like rapid pace right now. I'm 32, so I think that's like normal for my age, for other 30s and 20s people out there. But yeah, I think where I'm landing is that I'm really oriented towards the deconditioning process, but specifically igniting the helping, like being part of the ignition process for that deconditioning in others and providing them with some tools for them to navigate on their own so that they can become their own guru, their own guide, their primary teacher.
Gabriel chuckled when you said the death of the guru.
Yeah, I just have to like put in 2 cents about that. It is so true that what I would call trickster energy needs to see through any kind of phony authoritarianism. Absolutely true. But throwing the baby out with the bathwater, there's a need for initiation. There are people who have experience who don't have the ulterior motive of selling anything to you, right? The guru doesn't get a raise in pay when you get enlightened. They're committed to your freedom from them. If you understand that principle and also recognize that the way that teachers were venerated in India are very, very different than how we hold a professor, a mentor, or anybody else that seems to be transmitting something. They have maybe distorted in some ways, but also reverence. And if you have too much trickster, you see bullshit and you see right through it, and then you don't revere anything. And then if you can't find anything that's sacred, oh, that's a different kind of story. So I'm all for being empowered to recognize no one takes you deeper than yourself, but you may need someone reflecting back to you. Hey, no one takes you deeper than yourself. Don't listen to me. Go within, to convince you that you have the confidence to do that. Well, I wouldn't call that the death of the guru. I would just, because again, this is a very old technique. It's just the way our contemporary culture is spinning it as a necessary caution to people to not buy stuff that really is false.
Yeah, if I said death of the guru, what I meant was death of the guru complex and death of the savior complex. And I think like part of the process of becoming your own primary teacher is identifying how to use that discernment. That is exactly what you just described, Gabriel, how to discern which teachers are for me and at which times, and which teachers and role models and mentors and gurus have my best interests, my highest good in mind.
Right. Well, if someone could tell me how I'm not fooling myself by taking my path inward, I'm all open to hearing anybody's way. Is there a surefire way to know that you're not fooling yourself when you're following what your path is? Because if you're getting good things out of it, it would lead you to believe that's really good. But I'm also very interested in looking at the shadow aspect of every single teaching in order not to be fooled.
Mm-hmm.
I can go. One of the main things that's been showing up both in the individual, organizational, client work that I do, but then also in the students that I teach at, particularly in clinical psych, is really beginning to understand the systems that they exist inside of. And it's been really beautiful, the availability that people are starting to have for not just systems thinking, which is something that I'm just naturally akin to, but systems being, like realizing that your being has been boxed and structured and contained inside of systems, and that if you can understand your physiological system, if you can understand your cultural and patriarchal and white supremacy system, if you can start understanding the system of American psychology, the system of health, wherever you are functioning inside of, if you can start understanding those systems, then what movement in right relationship are we being called to? And that's where I think all of my work's been going. And internally for myself, as well as those that I spend time with.
Yeah, that really resonates in terms of, yeah, I have students here in one aspect of my life that are, yeah, in very much that same sort of unfolding. And it's always really powerful to bear witness to, right? And we're all in those processes in different spaces. And so it's great to both bear witness to and to have others witness. And I think in sort of in my yoga practice, as connected to other things that I do, I think my role and our role is to help folks ask questions, ask great questions of themselves and of those constructs. And Rachel, the sort of opening to the question around the way that President Biden spoke, I think that framing, that diagnosis and that framing is interesting around healing the soul of a nation, or thinking about it as healing now, when I think most of us understand that, whatever we understand as sort of a broken space of this nation has been that way for a very long time. It's not a new sort of brokenness. It's not something that just evolved in the past 4 years and so I think even being able to hold folks as we ask good questions about why that's the framing that's being given to us, why now, or why is that why is that the story that we want to tell now, that we've reached this sort of divisive state or this broken point, why are we pushed towards recognizing that in this moment and not thinking of it as sort of a long trajectory that we have been in and out of and have had different roles in, and being able to, support each other as we ask those questions, support each other as we define and redefine those questions, support each other as we have, heartbreaking answers, or sometimes really beautiful answers where we're able to put ourselves in lineage that then opens up more things for us. I think that's one of the most important parts of our roles.
Wonderful.
Cool. I just want to share, from my line of work and what I'm involved with, the different organizations. I work with a lot of folks that are creating videos for meditation, yoga, and practices. So I'm kind of in the background creating the musical palette for these experiences. So I want to think of myself as a Hans Zimmer of conscious music for these things. A lot of times you don't see me, but I work with these companies like Yoga Journal, Wanderlust, Commune, and the music, I'm in the background. So for me, that's my offering to the world right now, is creating music that is awakening humanity. Okay. And that is my passion and mission as well. I wrote that down back in 2011, when I was leaving the corporate world. I was what do I want to do? And it was to awaken humanity with music. So I'm doing that indirectly in many ways, with videos for meditation and for yoga and fitness as well, but more in the yoga world. And then that is a huge way of reaching the masses in a global way, because I don't have to physically be there, but I also like to physically be there. And that's where events come in. And what I'm looking forward to is going into this summer, knowing that people are doing a lot of outdoor events, and that's going to be happening all around the world more and more. And to me, that's exciting because that, we spoke about hope being a discipline. People are going to, they're going to really want to do more live events outdoors or whatever, because we've been missing it so much. And it's going to allow us to come together more. And so the thing is, with my kind of work and the videos, you can't just stuff this down people's throats. So as a nation that's like looking to heal, people are asking to heal and wanting to heal. So for those people, I think it's leading to them to these experiences of yoga, meditation, inward journey, and then we can show up and be those channels to like help them. But I think people really need to be asking for that experience. Like when you kind of shove it in their face, they kind of just like, I don't want to do, that's weird or whatever. But the exciting part is that more and more people are asking for it. Companies, corporations, these mindfulness programs are everywhere. So it's kind of like, and one of the companies I've worked with, Wanderlust, if you've heard of them, this is a company, like they've been around since 2009, and they kind of stopped doing their live events last year and then, or year before last, and then last year obviously crushed it. But they're a global thing. Amazing thing about this company is that they made like yoga and meditation like super cool with like millennials and like 20-year-olds, and where it was just like, it's sexy to meditate almost like, and it was just like, I'm so grateful for that, because it gets people through the door, and then they start asking the deeper questions. It's like whatever you got to do to get them over that fence. I want to be a part of that, because, we can preach to the choir, and a lot of us are like, it's like, when I do events, like these people are already into yoga, and that's cool. How do we get to those people that don't know about it, or just kind of like scratching at the surface, but they're really yearning for that? I was one of them, back in my 20s when I walked into that store, and I found that meditation. I was yearning and searching for the deep inward experience, but I didn't know about it. So how can we get to those people? That's my question. So I try to purposefully align with organizations that are reaching out to, situations like that, people like that. I just work with this company called Backline, and they provide mental health for the musician community. And so I made like 20 different music, like meditation sequences for, these are just people that are touring, playing music, but they need help to like calm down or whatever. So they're like, oh, I can listen to this music and just calm down and de-stress or lower my anxiety. They're not maybe looking for enlightenment. They don't even know what that is. They're just looking to find some peace in their busy lives. So that's exciting, that people are looking for that. And that's, I think, those little ways are how we're going to reach to the healing of the masses. It's a slower process, but I feel like there's this exponential thing, kind of like we're on the verge of it, and like we're about to like kind of hit that, because people are looking for that. They just don't really know it yet, and we're called for that because of all these situations of racism and prejudice and things like that. It's showing these like true colors, because no one wants to feel those kinds of energy.
Yeah. I think music plays an incredible role, because music can create an immediate state shift for people. And it's always available. You can always find somewhere to listen to music and find exactly what you want. It's so available, and it's such a deep emotional experience, and can really change a mood really quickly.
Absolutely.
And so this next question, I think the answer is going to be pretty quick. Over the course of everything that's gone on, are you all seeing a different demographic show up for your work? Who is it changing? Who's reaching out? Who's showing up at your events and your classes?
Well, I've always had a spectrum of people. Early on, it was only the hippies. And then later on, it became a little bit more disposable income people. But as things have gone on, it's really, most yoga teachers pay something forward that has nothing to do with monetizing their yoga life. And so it's just, for me, it's a spectrum. Maybe because I've been teaching a long time, I've seen a spectrum of people. And I don't know if you would say it's a trend, because again, I think yoga has always appealed to different kinds of people at different stages of their life. Are there more younger people practicing now? Is there more word on the street? Absolutely. But just I can veer off a little bit, how we get to connect to the masses. make a distinction between humanistic values and dharmic values. That way we're not trying to cram anybody, any philosophy down anybody's throat. But, boots on the ground here is people need to release their stress. People need to do better in their ethical and moral relationships with other people. People need to take responsibility for health practices, all the things that represent yoga, but we don't have to define it through Eastern philosophy. And then those people, as you say, who are aching and don't even know it, we're going to reach them through the things that are really important to them, like making their life less stressful and having greater clarity in our communication that isn't judgmental, but is really trying to hook them in.
So I have a therapy practice, and in that therapy practice, what has been shifting is this sort of pathological idea of mental health to a desire for integration. And so in that arc, clients, I would say that even my practice is moving, it incorporates therapy, but it's moving from therapy to really being with and guidance, and that there is an intersection between the work, the family, the thoughts, and so it's not so much like one thing anymore. It's kind of a wholeness. And just real quick to touch on Kimberly's question here about balancing servicing, helping others, and self-care. For me, it's been part of flipping my mind. And it's really been this true, deep understanding that we, through the study really of interpersonal neurobiology, that we truly are better together than apart. And so serving becomes a self-care for me.
Beautiful.
Fantastic, Megan. Just the phrase being with says it all.
Yeah. And we only know how to be with apart.
Stephanie, we can say something.
Oh, I think Megan has another question in there. If you want to answer it, someone wanted you to say more about systems.
We only have a couple minutes left. Let's Terry, why don't you email that to Megan? We put her email earlier. Does that sound good?
Welcome it, Terry.
Very welcome. Steph, were you going to add something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, in terms of classes, how sort of folks who are coming to classes has shifted. When I started doing Yoga for Black Lives, I was really teaching in just any community space that would have me. And I actually would love to get back to that, in a different version in a version of the future in which we can be back together. But it was mostly with folks that I knew, and folks who were already doing certain types of work that I was involved in, whether it was activist work or whether they were in school with me or just friends and loved ones. And so those folks are still around, but the way that it's shifted, I think, is that now there are more folks who are in solidarity with different movements or are part of different movements that are coming classes, and that's been really wonderful to see. That for people, either internally a conversation has changed for them, or they're parts of different external conversations that sort of are moving them towards a practice or a particular path. So that's been awesome.
Taz, what about in the yoga event industry? Are things changing? Because I know that in the yoga event industry, it's typically been a sea of white, young, able-bodied people. So is the event industry making any changes to invite in a different demographic and to make it a little bit more inclusive to others?
You mean like inviting people of different racial background?
Socioeconomic, racial, able.
I think like what you said is absolutely true, and that's been spotlighted, that it's been that kind of atmosphere for many years. And like, let's be honest, like a lot of yoga festivals are very expensive. You know, they're like, oh, It's $700 for 3 days. You know, I've played music at events that's like $1,000 for 4-day experience, and it's just a festival. And then there's add-ons to that. So it's like how many people can afford it. And because of that, a lot of those events have gone away. You know, I'm not going to say any names, but like those events, you know, they've been around for many years, but it's just not sustainable. But by, you know, seeing the talent and staff and the kind of teachers, because of what you said, it's been spotlighted. Hey, we need more different backgrounds to like represent. Like, I mean, I've been to so many yoga festivals, and I can honestly tell you, like, I barely ever see any Indian people at a yoga festival. It's just, I mean, like, you know, like, what's that all about? And people always ask me, like, hey, do you notice that there's actually like no Indians at this yoga festival? I'm like, yeah, you know, and to be honest, it's something like now if you go to like India, you'll see like yoga gatherings and festivals, but it's something that's not a very common thing to charge like hundreds of dollars to go do yoga. It's a very westernized idea of making it into a festival, monetizing it, sponsors. And when people ask me that, I think it's totally fine, to be honest with you, because it's just what we do best in the Western world is like we mix it with the way the West is. It's capitalism. It's this but it's making it accessible to people and the masses. So for me, like, there may be different ways to go about it, and I can't go too deep into that right now, but I think like that's what's happened is that they've created this, monetized it, and then only certain people will value that to go to it. And now it's like, okay, how do we make it so it's accessible by most people? So different festivals are looking at it. There's ways to like get scholarships or, you know, more situations. And as far as teachers goes, you know, it's like, hey, we need someone of color or we need an Asian background. It becomes that kind of situation where I don't want to use the word token, but it's like they need that. Like they've you know, I'm someone of color, and a lot of times I'm like the only someone of color in the room, you know? And but yeah, I mean, it's a socioeconomic thing, and it has to do with the price sometimes. A lot of times, I would say. I don't know.
And I think the representation of the teachers, you know, I think
the talent. Exactly.
Yeah, who are the
teaching
leaders? Yeah, who's teaching, and can you expand representation of who's being presented there? Yeah.
And people want that. I think like festivals want to invite more difference of backgrounds.
Yep.
Sometimes they just don't know how to like go about it. Maybe even like, hey, like it's a touchy subject for sure, but it is.
One of the problems though is massification. Thinking that just because this is the way the festival evolved, now it has to then spill over into the marginalized communities. But what's really happening at a much more local, smaller level is yoga infiltrating into different aspects of society, including things like I'm involved in a group that trains teachers so they can go into areas where the teacher looks like the people in the area and has the same cultural background as the people in the area, but it's not being done like, how can we expand this so we have thousands? No, it's being done, you know, small, like, you know, small is beautiful.
Grassroots.
Exactly.
It reminds me of like the imperialist yoga kind of. It's like, how do we get this everywhere? You know, it's like Starbucksified. You know, like we're gonna have one in every corner. It's like that's this capitalistic mentality. You know, like that's the Brits did that really well. You know, and we've learned from the Brits. You know,
never equate success with expansion.
Yeah.
So I want to talk to you all for the whole rest of the afternoon. I feel like this is really rich, and I had so many more questions. But we have hit our hour, and I want to respect everyone's time. I also want to say we did have a question that came through that I kind of moved past that said, could Megan or others say more about systems and how to consciously navigate that? That's a beautiful conversation that could open up a whole thing. And I would just like to invite any of you that want to be a part, if we want to take that onto a crucial conversation and really dig in there in another time and space, let's do it, because that is very important. To close. Let's share some advice. What advice do you have on people who are tiptoeing onto a healing path, who are feeling this intuitive call and just kind of don't know where to start? there's been so much deep grief over the last year. There's been a lot of darkness and a lot of heaviness, and people are understanding that change is possible, healing is possible, and if they're ready for it, where to begin? One short piece of advice from each of you to close. Let's start with Stephanie.
I would say my piece of advice would be to lean in, though I truly dislike that phrase, would be to lean into the questions that are coming up for you around wanting that healing, or around wanting to find something. I think those can be really uncomfortable feelings, and especially in a context that has been so unbearable for some people. But I think really diving into those questions and seeing what emerges, you might be your own, you are your own best teacher, but you might also be your best first teacher. So leaning into those questions around what it is you're looking for and what it is you're hoping to find, and just being able to sit with those questions for a while might be a great way to start.
Gabriel?
Find your passion. Find what you love to do. Even if it's a trial and error and you reject a lot of stuff, but then you know that that's not it. And that means if you find your passion, you'll be able to celebrate life because you found something that creates vitality in you. But the flip side of that is because of those systems, we all have patterns, habits that sometimes can make us feel unworthy or less than, and that holds us back. And if people are in any way afraid or threatened, they're not going to come out and play. So both those things have to happen. Find safe space to do the emotional work of unfinished wounds and healing, and find what you love to do so you become a celebratory human being. And of course, connect with other people.
Kelsey?
I would say acknowledge or consider that the single most impactful thing you can do for the collective, for your community, for those you're in relationship with, is to look within and to tend to what's there. And that part of that process is trusting that the things that are calling you to them are the things that are for you.
Begin. Just start. Start anything. Just begin. We'll go to the next thing. It will scaffold, it will move, but beginning is how you start. And for me, there was a time where I was very out of alignment. What I was engaged in wasn't right. And I laid my yoga mat out, and if I only just stood on it, that was starting. Just starting.
Just start.
Just start.
Yeah. So this for me is personally very important. Is stick to it. Stick to something and actually follow through with what you signed up for, the program you bought, or the teacher you're working with. Because in our culture, just everywhere, there's so much stimuli that in 2 minutes you can find a new guru or a program or a yoga posture or something just to get you distracted. And our level of addiction, even in like the spiritual world or the yoga world, where people are addicted to the next thing or the next workshop, the next program, or I'm going to get awakened next weekend when I attend this thing. It's like, no, stick to something, practice it. And I can say this, when I was starting to meditate, I would do certain programs for months. Like I would listen to the same meditation around abundance or around, changing this behavior or whatever for like repeatedly over a couple of months, because healing practice, it's kind of like going to the gym. You don't go one time and you're like, it didn't work. Like I tried, you have to keep showing up to the practice. And over time, there's a chance that grace will show up in a big way and allow that awakening and enlightenment or whatever it is to take place. So show up to yourself, stick to it, and miracles are possible.
Hmm. And my advice is to always look for the beauty, that there's a lot of darkness and there's a lot of heaviness, but the beauty never goes away. Go take a walk, find one single flower that your eyes are drawn to, find one cloud that you think is interesting, and just always look for what beauty is surrounding you. It's always there. Okay. Thank you so much to all of you. This has been amazing. Thank you for those of you that have joined. Have a wonderful rest of your afternoon. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.